Alright, take number 5. Because I live in a house with very loud people. They don't know when to be quiet. Anyway, starting from the beginning. Welcome to my TED Talk. My TED Talk is on gang violence. A gang against police violence. Gang affecting society violence. This is the public issue we are addressing today. So, first of all, what's a gang? The book definition of what a gang is. A gang is a group of people who claim a territory and use it to make money through illegal activities such as drug trafficking, amongst other things. So you got, for example, you got the Bloods, you got the Crips. You know, they got their territory, they got their side of LA, and Crips got their side of LA. Members of a gang wear specific articles of clothing to be recognized as part of the group, such as bandanas, hats, scarves, certain colors, gang-related tattoos, or symbols. So like I said, you got Bloods, red, Crips, blue, and then with gang-related tattoos or symbols, you got gangs like MS-13 that wear them on their face, across their body, representing that they're part of the gang. Yeah. So what could possess somebody to join a gang? You know, surprisingly, a lot of things actually. Their presence, you know, simply just being in the area can possess somebody to want to join a gang, whether their friends are joining it or their family is a part of it, especially if it's that close to home. And that goes on to my second point, family affiliation. So let's say your mom, your dad, siblings, your friends, your cousins, whatever, are part of a gang. As family, you're probably going to be the go-to person that they want to go to join the gang, like convinced to join the gang. You know, just because your family, you just want to further that bond more, you know, like, it could be a number of reasons why they want you to join the gang. A history of sexual or physical abuse. Sexual leaning more towards women can happen to men, but leaning more towards women. And physical abuse on both sides, for sure. Whether it's from their parents or from bullying, and you know, because physical abuse can just be from people in general. You know, it does, like, it can be from your parents, but like bullies beating you up and stuff can lead you to want to seek safety and security from a local gang. If your parents don't provide it, if your school doesn't provide it, sometimes you feel like you don't have a choice. As an adolescent, you don't think of every single factor, you know. And going on to what Mackenzie said, the police, they're not our first go-to because of the kids being told to be afraid of them from the get-go. So going to them in their head is not an option. Access to weapons or drugs. So weapons are a very big thing that can spark curiosity. And as adolescents, all the way up to being a teenager, our curiosity's all over the place, right? Which is fine. But as long as we're curious about the right things, exploring things that could benefit us as people. But if you're trying to go into like selling weapons and stuff and getting to know your weapon and all that jazz, that's one thing, but never mind. And the same thing with drugs, like Ray said, you know, like as little kids, we're curious about what they do. Some people fall into it and they try it and then they get addicted. So try it, it's not for them. Some just choose not to try it at all. I say not to try it at all, but that's just me, I guess. Lack of success. And when I say that, I mean that from coming from teenagers. Lack of success, like in school. You know, those that feel like they're not academically inclined and that they drop out of high school, they fail high school, they feel like that's just not for them. And you know, dropping out of high school as a choice. Some people do that and they make it just fine. But for example, if they just simply have the presence in the neighborhood, you have family affiliation, and you got weapons and drugs all in the mix, People who drop out of school are most likely to end up in gangs. And 70% of adolescents that actually try to get out of gangs after doing things like such as getting into them, for example, don't. 70%. So it's a pretty high number. And it also goes to show how many people after a while regret joining the gang. Which leads me to my next point, family. And now I know I touched on family affiliation earlier, but when I say family, I mean just a family in general. And this I'm leaning more towards orphans, people who don't have families. So people can go to gangs, orphans can go to gangs simply to find refuge, a home, people to love, people to rely on, because obviously they don't have that. Which goes to my next point now, a sense of belonging. Like I said, being an orphan, you may feel like you're out of place in the world, that just because your parents aren't there, that you don't know what to necessarily do. So being in a gang can be like your pathway that you feel like is right for you at that moment, especially being a kid. People joining as young as the age of 11, you know, just making the decision for themselves of going into the game because they feel like that's what's best for them, you know, even if it's against their parents' wishes, whether they have them or not, which leads them to have in their heads power and control, you know, leading them to believe that just because I have a gun in my pocket, that if I pull it out, I can command people what to do. I'm not saying that's wrong, because personally, I don't want a gun pointed at me, so I'm gonna chill, you know. So, like I said, just a sense of power and control, something that they don't have in their normal everyday life. So, what do these all have in common? The emotion. This one was hard actually, because there's a lot of emotions that can coincide with all of these different things that could persuade someone to do this, to join a gang to begin with, you know. Whether it's fear, anger, sadness. But that's what I lean towards most, is loneliness. More like the fear of being alone. Because all these people are looking for the same thing in a way. You know, they're either looking for just people to be around, family, people to care about, you know, because that's something they don't have. Or they don't have the support system at home to begin with, so they look for that support system, and they find that in gangs, because whether we see it or not, gangs can be viewed in a lot of different ways. Whether it's gangs being seen as, you know, like terrorists to a community, and all that they're doing is, you know, selling drugs and having prostitutes out in corners with a pimp, you know, like in their control of that. And a lot of things can be said about, negative things can be said about gangs. But I'm not saying that it's positives to being in a gang, but to the people that are like going to join, they think that it's positive because that's what they feel like, oh, these people are gonna care for me, it's gonna be my family, you know, and they're gonna make sure that I'm okay, because they don't have that. So, what does this topic mean to me? Okay, get a little heavy. Okay, for the sake of time and for my own sanity, I'm not gonna say names, out of respect for the people in these stories, in this story. So when I was 12, I lived in Riverside, California. I would go back and forth from Arizona here, go there for any break that I could, but winter break, summer break, whatever, and I would stay over there. Now, since I was 6 years old, I had two childhood friends. You know, I won't name them, but I had two childhood friends. And what I didn't know at the time, because I grew up with these guys from the ages 6 to 12, 13, one or two. What I didn't know is that his brother was in a gang. I didn't know this. He didn't know that either. But one day, he offered to take us to get some food at McDonald's or something like that. I don't know. As a little kid, that seemed awesome, so we went along for the ride, like whatever, right? And we get in the car. He says we gotta make one quick stop first. And I'm like, all right, cool. And he's like, all right, cool. And so we pull up in a neighborhood, and there's a couple of cars already waiting there. They're just a couple of guys talking, and he gets out the car with a little duffel. And so he goes, and I hear him yell like, "Hey, I got the stuff," or whatever to the guys that their little group. And so he gives him another duffel, and then next thing I know, all I heard was pow, pow, pow. All I heard was gunshots. And so my friend, being the person that he was, his first instinct was to go save his brother, to go make sure that he was okay. What I ended up finding out afterwards is that his brother got to safety behind the car, and he ended up running away and left us there. So obviously I didn't know at the time, and neither did he. But his first action is jumping out of the car that we were in, running in the open to find his brother, and all I heard was a bunch of gunshots and a thud. He was in the middle of the street, and I was behind the car. Next thing I knew, I saw one of my best childhood friends on the floor. And I dragged him out from the middle of the street behind the car because we were still getting shot at. And he was just sitting there bleeding in my arms. I got shot in the neck, chest, stomach, you name it. And I kind of just sat there and looked at him. And I just wanted to make sure he wasn't alone. And he died then and there. And his brother was later arrested. So there's some good that came out of this story. But not even 2 days after his funeral, 2 days. I mentioned his second childhood best friend. Not even 2 days after his funeral, the other childhood friend of ours, committed suicide in his bathroom. He hung himself from the window beam that he had. And like I said earlier, some people are just looking for a family, and he was like exactly like that. He would hop from house to house because his parents didn't want him. He lived with my family for a couple of years, lived with my friend for a couple of years. And it was just hard being the only one left. But it taught me that danger out there is very real, and that life is short, But I didn't come here to preach. I don't want to get too off topic, but that's what this topic means to me, is how it affects me. And this is why I chose this topic, because I've been through it. And since then, I've had other family members, whether it's in drive-bys or other things, overdose, deportation. I've lost people. Haven't we all, right? So, like I said, this is a big thing, and it needs to be addressed. And also, how can one really be corrupted by this? And like I said, family, big thing. Save space, or people in financial troubles, people who can't provide for their own families. They feel like this is the only way, because it's an easy dollar, and I can do this and make ends meet, and I can protect my family. I can gain status in the community. Everybody will know my name, because in a way, people are after that respect, that power, to have that pride, to be proud, of something. when they have in a place where everybody has nothing. An example of this evil, I have an article here pulled up on my computer, on my presentation. So the title is, and I quote, "Girl 5 years old, is the sixth child killed by a stray bullet in Rio de Janeiro this year," which is a place in Brazil, the city. And it says police operations targeting drug gangs have put children in the crossfire in the Brazilian city, where at least 21 minors have been struck by stray bullets in 2019. So, like I said in the beginning, whether it's gangs versus another gang, a gang against the police, a gang against affecting the community, like innocent children that were just in the wrong place in the wrong time are the ones being affected by this. Like some mother out there lost their baby girl, and so this unnecessary act over something as meaningless as drugs and money getting in the way of other people's lives and destroying lives. Meanwhile, like Mackenzie said, putting other police officers in danger over a needless need. And that's not right. Going back to how I've been affected by this. Gangs like Sex Cash Money, yes, that's the name. The Donor Block Criminal Gang, which is actually made up of 3 gangs. Both are indigenous to Merino Valley, which I have family up there. Whether it's my tío Cesar and his sons, both surrounded around this violence every day. Then you got in Riverside the Casablanca Rifas, the Casablanca Gangster Crips or whatever. Personally, I never had any run-ins with them, but I've heard that they're very popular. But seeing things like that and like the street below, like whether it was waking up in the middle of the night, the gunshots or cars crashing, police sirens, you name it, like that was the normal for me. Yeah. So places where I've seen it and probably where you've seen it too. TV, big thing, whether it's a TV show or a movie. Shows like My All American, where it goes from a rising football star from the ghetto going up to Beverly Hills playing football, which is great, but it shows you like the process that I just displayed here, like people going through a hard time, doing what they have to do, and they feel like joining a gang is what they have to do, so they do it. Just look at the main character's best friend, if you've seen it. The news is a very big thing, whether it's the FBI websites or the CIA websites and the local news, and whether it's popular in LA, New York, Chicago, all these places, very popular in the news. My personal life, personally, it's affected me. I don't know if it's affected any of you, but in my personal life is a big thing. In our society, we live in a society that doesn't necessarily ensure children, especially those who are delinquents, and encouragement to get back into society, because especially those who get into gangs and then immediately not immediately regret it, but over time regret it and want to go back into society, we have nobody helping them get back into society. There's nothing being done about that, but I'll go into that later. Social media, whether it's Instagram, Snapchat, YouTube, all these different things. You can find things about that there, whether it's people dressed as gangsters or want to be gangsters, whatever. On music, whether you got people like Kendrick, Isaiah Rashad, 6ix9ine, 6ix9ine especially promoting gang violence, not violence, but the lifestyle of a gang. Whether it's the twerking butts in his videos, the marijuana being smoked in his videos with a bunch of homies by his side, promoting that this is okay, that this is cool. It's not. Now, the face of evil. The face of evil. I went ahead and actually chose a group because gangs being a vast uh vast subject. Um, I felt it best to choose a specific gang. So actually, the person I want to focus on is Gerardo Lopez, who is a former MS-13 member. Now, what's MS-13, you might ask? So, picture this, all right? El Salvador in the 1980s in a brutal civil war. Military soldiers kicking in doors at night, uh, children shaking under their beds, and mothers laying in a puddle of their own blood while watching the soldiers take away their children and sending them off to war. All right. Thousands of Salvadorian refugees dumped in the U.S., desperate for a better life, dumped in the ghettos of Los Angeles. And then amongst them was a kid named Nelson. With both parents working around the clock, having multiple jobs, Nelson was alone a lot. In a new country with new customs and new languages. He was bullied. Him and the other Salvadorian immigrants were bullied by the Chicano kids. Chicanos are Mexicans, who were bullied because of the different accents and cultures. So one day the Nelson and the other Salvadorian kids had enough. So the bullies became the bullies themselves, essentially, and then they created MS-13. And now a quote by Gerardo is, MS-13 is the tragic outcome of a tragic environment. He's absolutely right. So then, going forward, it's 1996. The U.S. deported thousands of immigrants back to El Salvador, and Nelson being one of them. But he's a grown-up now, and he's very different. He spoke English. And he dressed like a gangster, with the Nike Cortezes and the ripped jeans and the wife beater with the bandana. He didn't fit within the El Salvador culture anymore, and they noticed, but they didn't mock him for it. They actually praised him. They wanted to be like him. That he looked like one of the gangsters from the movies. He was so cool, and that they wanted to be like him, and wanting to be like them meant wanting to join MS-13. Now, going to Gerardo, the person I want to focus on. Because on the contrary, instead of focusing on someone evil, I want to focus on someone who actually fell into the abyss of evil and came back out, is now making a difference, which I will get to in a bit. Gerardo lived in MS-13 territory surrounded by gangs for miles. He didn't feel safe anywhere he went. He used to watch them from his apartment window, including Nelson, one day. And he saw that, he came back from El Salvador and he was being received with all this pride, or not pride, with all this praise. And he wanted that for himself. So, watching Nelson, he saw that he got all the respect, power, and pride. All that he did not have or did not feel like he had. So at the young age of 14, that's when he decided to join MS-13. And after he was initiated, he felt instant relief. He felt that power, that pride. He was proud to represent his gang. Even though being locked up multiple times in his childhood, he was proud. You remember getting his first MS-13 tattoo, that every time he got locked up, he'd be proud to take off his shirt to represent, hey, I'm part of MS-13. And he wore it proudly. So then, going on forth, he would realize the effect that it actually had on his family. And his family being, because not a lot, because due to them being immigrants. Wait, they weren't immigrants. My bad. His grandma and his mom would light candles every time he wasn't locked up to pray that he wasn't the one coming home in a white body bag. And then when he was locked up, they would go and visit him and ask him, when are you going to grow up? When are you going to stop this? And it wasn't until one day a man approached him offering to join a gang prevention group, because he was looking for a way out anyway after he saw how it was affecting his family. He wanted out. So what he did was the moment that made him realize that he wanted to leave was when he was in the street and he was talking to this man offering him a way out. And then he looked up into the same apartment window, and that's when he saw his little brother right there in the same place that he was all those years ago. Now 20 years old, being in the gang for 6 years. Quick maths. He found a way out. He left, and he went to join the gang prevention center, the group, gang. And basically what he came to realize is that he found a bunch of different people from different gangs showing up to this one united gang to find out that they all ultimately wanted the same thing. That they were all the same, that their parents and their moms, they cried the same tears each other's moms did. And the only difference between them was the name of a gang. Everyone was going to do the same thing. Now, where am I going with all this? Gerardo, now, after working in a gang intervention for over 2 decades, he escaped the gang life and now ensures that he prevents at-risk youth in the same kind of environments from making the same mistakes. He is the executive director of the Denver chapter of Homies Unidos. Yes, that's what it's called. A nonprofit dedicated to ending violence and promoting peace through gang interventions and prevention. Gerardo is an avid baseball fan waiting for the Dodgers to win the World Series, and the subject of an award-winning short documentary, Clever. So he literally went from the ground up to this point, so where now he has his he has a degree, and he's inspiring other kids in the same situations to do the same. And now to my conclusion. What do I feel like can be done about this? Really, the first thing I would want to happen was, like I said earlier, there's nobody helping those who already are in the pit, out of the pit. Everyone is just leaving those people in the pit. So I feel like there should be people that actually help those that are in gangs, transition back into society to be working class members of society. And then those in low class areas, for there to be people to encourage them to do more, to do better. Because honestly, this is what happens when you have talented but unmotivated people. The motivation is not there. So I feel like if we just encourage them more, let them know the dangers of being in a gang, and let them know what's around them, that I feel like a lot less people will want to explore what that is, because they'll know what that is. And so that's what I would say. We start a youth program, like he's doing. He's doing it, So I'm glad there's something being done in a way. And yeah. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Deuces.